Welcome back to the DataStack Show. Today, we are going to talk with Paige, who is a staff data analyst at Netlify. Now, she also has engineering chops, and we're going to hear about that. Maybe even throw in a little story about Perl, about writing pipelines in Perl, which will be very exciting. But I'm interested to hear about sort of what I would call like the other side of the data stack as it exists and the people who are working with the data, delivering it, et cetera. We talk, all the time about the technology, the data itself, and the tooling around it. And I'm so excited to ask Paige, she bridges the gap between the technology and the infrastructure and sort of the processing and delivery of actual, sort of data products in the form of analytics to the team. And so I'm just really excited to hear about that because we don't get to talk about that very often. How about you, Kostas?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm very, very interested to hear about how it is like to work in Netlify. It's a product that I also use for my personal blog, and it has a very different way of approaching like the infrastructure, internet infrastructure. So I'm pretty sure, and usually it's like something that you see that when you have companies that they innovate a lot and they are very innovative and they bring something very new, usually this is also reflected to the practices that they have, like how the organization is, like even to the people that they have there. So yeah, I'm very happy that we have Paige with us today. I think we are going to have a very interesting conversation that's going to be both technical, about technology, but also about the organization, the teams, how we work together, how we communicate, analytics and data, and all that stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, let's dive in and talk with Paige.
Let's do it.
Paige, welcome to the DataStack Show. We're so excited to chat with you.
Yay! Thank you so much, Eric and Kostas. I'm really excited to be here.
Okay, we always start in the same place, which is where you tell us about sort of your career path and what led you to what you're doing at Netlify.
All right, cool. Well, my career path is it's not super straightforward, but it all has a theme of data and it all has a theme of learning on the job. So my first job with computers was at the IT help desk at the university I worked at. Where I got the job, even though I didn't really know much about computers, because I answered every interview question with, I don't know, but I can learn, and ended up proving that to be true. Yeah. It's been kind of the theme of my career. After that, I worked in a role where I got to administer databases and write reports. I taught myself SQL for that job. It was really fun. Then I worked in the college administration at Reed College, where I got to do some programming in C and Oracle PLSQL, and I built an ETL pipeline in Perl, which I don't recommend, but it did work.
That's impressive. Wow.
It was a really fun challenge.
Have you kept the scripts, the Perl scripts? I mean, they're a work of art. Like, you should keep that.
I probably do have it saved somewhere, actually, on an external drive. I should frame it. Yes.
Yeah. Or create an NFT out of it.
Oh, there you go. Now that is a fun idea. Yay. So yeah, after that, I worked at New Relic, a company here in Portland, where I live, as a software engineer, where I got to learn Git and processes for collaborating on building a code base. But what I realized during that job is that I still loved playing with data most of all, and that's been the case at all of these positions. So I moved into a role as a data analyst, first for the support organization and then for product, where I got to work with things like Redshift and Snowflake and Airflow and write code in Python, learn what dbt was. And then I also got to learn a lot about hiring practices, because our teams doubled in size after I joined, both of them. And so I got to help with the hiring process and with building a team culture. And got some good practice on how to teach an organization to be more data informed, which was really interesting. And all of that's been really helpful for me as I joined Netlify in March 2021 as a staff data analyst. So yeah, that's the career journey.
Very cool. Okay, before we talk about some of the specifics of what you do at Netlify, I have to ask about the IT desk. Okay, so is there like a weird computer issue that a student brought in, with their laptop that sticks out where you're just like, that was so bizarre, or like, what happened here?
Boy, it has been a lot of years. So I'm trying to think. I don't think anything's really jumping out. What I remember most about that job, though, was that the first few weeks, what I would have to do was I'd go to like the professor's office who was having a problem with their computer, and I'd sit down at their computer and they'd say, the computer is broken in this way, it's doing this. And I'd say, great. And then I'd pick up the phone and call my manager and say, they said blah, blah, blah. What do I do? And he would walk me through how to troubleshoot and solve the problem. And that was a lot of how I learned how to fix computers.
Yeah, that probably actually is good, sort of in terms of working with data, troubleshooting, software engineering. Like that's a great, sort of breaking down the process and all of that. I'm sure that there were just a lot of restarts too to fix whatever.
Oh, yes. Yes. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Yes. And there were plenty of unplugged as well. Like,
oh man.
Plug it in. It might work if we plug it in.
If only data pipelines were like that.
Right.
Okay, so what does your day-to-day job look like at Netlify? I know you probably do a lot of different things, but just help us understand, what your role is and sort of your responsibilities and team and all that.
Sure. Yeah. So at Netlify, we have a data team that follows the kind of hub and spoke model. So we've got a few of us who do the hub work, and then we have other people on the team who work with spokes, so different business partners. We've got someone who works with finance, a couple of folks who work with product, someone who works with growth, et cetera. I'm a member of the hub team, so that means that I do things like I pick up tasks and projects that maybe don't fall under one of the spokes, or I will pick up some spoke work if the folks on that spoke have more than they can get done. I also get to spend a good amount of time doing proactive insights work. So looking through the data that I've been working with, and if I'm doing a task for a stakeholder who's requested data, and I say, boy, there's something interesting here, let me get this task done. And then I want to dive into this and actually see what's going on with this data. I get to do a good amount of that work. And then there's also work around like team building, culture building, things like that. If we're doing hiring, I'll help with that part of the process. And that's a lot of it. So it's a really good mix really of data analysis and exploration of I'll even do analytics engineering if I've got to build some data models to get the analysis done, even some data engineering, bringing in data from new sources. I get to do a little of all of that, which is great.
So fun. That sounds like a really fun job.
It is. I love it.
Okay, we have definitely some questions to ask about the team structure on Hub and Spoke. But first, what you wrote a post a while back around some of the ways that you share insights that come from data. And so I love your description of, sort of the freedom to go in and explore, but I think it's really interesting how you've, sort of taken the results of those types of explorations and syndicated them to the team. So can you tell us there? I think our audience would just love to hear how you do that, because I certainly learned a lot reading the post.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. Yes. Yeah, one of the interesting things about when you're searching through data, you come up with an insight, it doesn't really do much unless other people hear about it. So figuring out the best way to get that information shared has been a fun thing to work on at Netlify. So our norm for communication is using Slack. So we have a Slack channel that is dedicated to sharing data insights. And when we've discovered something that's interesting in the data, it usually helps to figure out, okay, what are the things that are really important about this insight? If somebody's got, 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and all they can do is just skim the post in the channel, what do I want them to make sure that they're seeing? So that helps to really clarify, like, okay, this is what's interesting about this data, and kind of get it into a few bullet points, even like bolding some of the numbers and words so that if all they read are those bolded numbers and words, they understand what's
like
interesting.
the too long don't read. Like,
yeah,
this is the punchline.
Exactly. And then it always helps to add at least one chart because, this can be really visual stuff. It's super helpful for if someone's all they're going to do is look at a chart, they can see just from that, like, oh, there's something intriguing here in this picture. And maybe that's all I'm going to look at, but I know there's something here. And then in the back of their mind, they can remember if they're working on some project and a couple weeks later, it's like, oh, there was an insight about this data. I'm going to go back and read that because it might inform like the decision we're making right now. Yeah.
I love that. I love the thinking about it as assets that you sort of collect over time that can inform future work, right? Because so many times we produce data or reports or whatever, and you just, basically throw them away. I mean, my Google Sheets is a nightmare of ad hoc analyses,
For sure. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So, and we also, we keep these also in an insights feed. So we have an internal, essentially blog, or we have an internal handbook at Netlify, and the insights feed is a part of that handbook. So it really is like a blog people can go and read through. If they've been away for like on vacation for a few weeks, they can come back and say, okay, what is the data team posted since I've been out, and catch up on all of the insights in the insights feed as well.
One quick question for you there, and that, as we think about our audience and all of us really as people who are sort of on some level trying to deliver data products, whether that's as infrastructure or insights.
Right.
One of the challenging things when you're delivering insights is sort of the scope and the context, because it's like, if you're seeing a small slice of something, not having the larger context can be challenging. How do you think about the scope and the context of delivering an insight, especially when you think about kind of the too long don't read side of it? And I'm asking that selfishly because I'm trying to do a better job of this inside, my own role. Because if you just share kind of a number without any context, not that that's happening, but sometimes people are like, that's interesting, but I don't quite get it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Part of the process that we go through when we are doing a proactive insight actually is captured in a GitHub issue. So as a data team, we actually capture all of our issues, all of the work we do in GitHub. We operate kind of similar to a software engineering team in that way. And when one of us is going to start a proactive insight, we open an issue and begin with the question, what's prompted this exploration? What are we curious about? What has happened recently that made us think, oh, this would be really important to look at? And all that context is at the beginning of the issue. And then as we do the exploration, we add comments to the issue for every step. So that includes like the SQL code we're running, some of the results from that, like intermediate charts that show part of what we're trying to get at. So we are taking someone on the journey of this exploration with us through this issue. And certainly not everyone's going to have the time to read that, but it can help a lot when we're then going to write the post about the insight, to go back to that beginning, and include I did this insight to answer this question, and this was the reason why I was looking into this. And then this is what I found. That's often how we can incorporate some of that context to let people know why this is actually important to the business.
That makes total sense. I think about it's the Mark Twain quote where he says, "I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time."
Yes.
And so just hearing about that process, it makes total sense. If you've wrestled that question to the ground,
Yeah.
you then have the ability to deliver that in a concise way that includes the context.
Yes.
Very cool. Okay, Kostas, I've been dominating the mic here. Please, I know you have questions brewing in your head.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, I have okay, my first question is, I think, pretty simple, but I want to ask you, Paige, what is an insight for you, and for your team? What constitutes an insight?
Ooh, that's a good one. No, I'm trying to think of a good example. I had one that I was working on that was because I'd noticed that there was this particular error happening in the product, and I noticed it completely dropped off at one point. And that was my insight, something changed here. And I don't know what it is, but I'm really curious as a data person about why this would change at this point. And getting to post that was really fun, because then people in our engineering org were able to come into the channel and say, oh, I know what it was. This software engineer applied this fix and we thought it made a difference, but it's really cool to see in this chart the impact that work had. That was a really fun one. And then there are definitely ones around connecting specific feature usage to specific outcomes. That's something that is an area that I tend to have a lot of fun with. And so a lot of the insights I dig into tend to be really around that. When a team is using this is what tends to happen within the next 3 months. And those are really fun.
Oh, that's very interesting. So the way that I hear it, as you describe it, it feels like you're some kind of explorer,
Yes.
You're out there in the ocean, and you are
Yes.
finding this island and the other island and creating a map. But how do you start this exploration? What's the motivation, and what's the journey?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Thinking about it that way. Often it initially is prompted by a stakeholder request. We get requests from anyone across the company, and when we're looking at the data required to fulfill request, we know it's about something that somebody is currently interested in and working on, which is going to tie to our goals as a company. So that's a good sort of initial pointer, I guess, to what could be important or interesting to know about. Usually once the request is filled, then you've already become acquainted with the data that is going to matter for this particular thing people are curious about. And at that point, then okay, well, this is the data that people are asking about. Let me dig further into here, or let me pull in this other data that can inform that in this way that is new. And that's often how we get started on one of our insight explorations.
Oh, that's cool. And one of the issues that I always have, when it comes to data and trying to be let's say data informed or driven or whatever we want to call organization, is how people can agree upon the definition of the problem that we are trying to solve, or the insight. That's why I also ask you about what's the definition of the insight, because many times, even for things that we take for granted, what is the revenue, or what is the cost, or stuff that we instinctively take for granted, they are not actually the definition behind it might be quite different. And usually you figure that out when you start working with data, because you have to be very precise with how you communicate there. You're very experienced with that, because you have to work with many different people so far. How big of a problem is it? Is it, first of all, a problem? I just think that this is something that is important. And second, how do you deal with it?
Just to make sure I'm understanding fully, the problem of making sure that the definitions of the metrics we're talking about are agreed upon. Is that where you're going?
Yeah. You said that someone, a stakeholder, might come with a request, right?
Yes.
They express I don't know, a problem that they have, right? And then you have to start like working and like digging into data to help them with that. But
Yes.
first of all, the two of you have like to agree on what the problem is, right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm asking, like how big of a problem is this? If it is, maybe it's just my problem, to be honest.
I think about active users, like like, would you say that, Kostas, is like, hey, could you tell me if our like number of active users has gone up, right? And it's like, okay, the number of questions that we have to ask to like, you know, you could kind of give any number back and it's probably not wrong. You know, it just depends on the definition. Maybe I'm going on the wrong path, but that's what jumped to mind for me.
No. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So how do you feel about it?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely enjoy, I think it's a joke around that of like, you know, somebody says, can you tell me how many active users we have? And the answer is, well, that depends on what you mean by active, and users are daily or active or users. Yeah, every word needs to be unpacked. The definition for what someone's looking for, that I think is a really big and interesting and gnarly and fun opportunity to figure that out. And I feel like a lot of folks are talking about that in the data profession in different ways that we can try to have a solution for that, like, you know, defining metrics in a separate layer. And once we get that defined, that is then the source of truth for what that metric means, because that is definitely the part that I considered the most interesting, but also can be most time consuming part of responding to a data request. So I don't know if there's really, I don't know that there are very many times in my career where somebody has asked me for data and I have been able to just go get it without coming back with at least one, if not several rounds of questions to really understand, okay, first of all, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the decision you're trying to make? Because there may be actually other things that I can give you that will help with that even more. But if it turns out that yes, what you're asking for is exactly what you need, then let's still actually figure out the definitions for the words you use to make sure that the data I'm pulling, like what I'm telling the database, is what you would tell it if you could.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think we are going to see also like probably products around that. Like, okay, we have like the data catalogs, which comes like from the enterprise space, and with like products like Colibra. But these are, again, they are like more on the, what I would call like still on the syntactic level and not that much like on the semantic level, because, okay, we can agree like on what each of the data fields that we have mean, right? But going from that to the point where we build, let's say, knowledge, like institutional knowledge, like what is like the KPI and how all these things connect together. I think there's a big gap there between the two, and we need more of like a knowledge, like, let's say, catalog, probably something like that. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel that this internal wiki that you have, right, do you feel like it acts as a knowledge repository for the organization where like the data team can communicate like all these knowledge actually that is generated by doing all this analysis and creating all these insights?
Yes, that's, I really appreciate that you use that word. We kind of consider it a knowledge hub, and it isn't necessarily only this insights feed, but there are a few things that fit into what we call, what we think of as this knowledge hub. So there's the insights feed. There is, we use DBT, and we have our DBT docs, which is another aspect of knowledge where our models, our DBT models, are all very well documented. And then we have another layer. We are using Transform, which is one of those metric repository kind of products where we are able to define a metric in Transform with an explanation around it. And then our stakeholders can run charts and even do some like slicing by dimensions and stuff on these charts, knowing that the definition of the metric is something that the company has agreed on. And so the there doesn't have to be that question of like, is this actually really daily active users? Because we know it is. We decided on that as an organization. This is the definition in the SQL. You can even like look at the SQL in Transform. So that helps with another piece of that knowledge. So it is different places, but we kind of think of it as all of this together are different facets of knowledge about the data and the business.
And this knowledge repository is something that's like owned and managed by the analytics team or some other like team of the organization?
Yeah, it's all owned and managed by us on the data team. So any of us are able to administer any of these systems, add to any of them, edit stuff in there. It's all essentially like part of our code base.
Oh, wow, that's super cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about like how you started doing that? Like how you decided to structure like this knowledge repository in this way, and whose idea was that to have like a wiki first of all there?
Right, that's a good one. I'm trying to remember exactly who came up with that. I think it was a combination of our director, Emily Sherio is the director of data at Netlify when I started, or and someone else on the team. I can't remember who else on the team. I'd have to look it up, but it was definitely like others on the team who said, hey, we could do it this way, or let's put it here. Because we all kind of we know this is an issue and we are all trying to think of ways to solve it as a team. So I'd have to look in the history of our Slack to see who exactly suggested which part, but
okay.
Yeah,
that's nice. And I want to ask, because you are also work a lot with like building teams and like building the right culture. How do you, let's say, motivate a team outside of running the analysis and working with the data also to sit down and write the right content in order to communicate with the rest of the organization? Like how do you do that?
Right. That's another interesting aspect of this. I think at first we weren't sure about it when Emily Sherio suggested it. She's the one who really encouraged us to start doing this as a data team, as a way to kind of keep us out of getting trapped into being a service organization and only ever being reactive. When she first brought it up, I think at first we were all like, oh, this is different. This is new. I haven't really done this before. Am I going to make time for it? Is this really going to be helpful? And with her encouragement, we went ahead and started trying it. And the response was so awesome. There was like really great conversations in the Slack threads. Every time we would post an insight, there would be questions that came out of it. Other people in the company would have conversations with themselves in the threads. We could see so clearly the benefit that was bringing the way people were thinking about data in like these new ways, that it made it easier and easier to like make time to do these and get them posted. It's part of our weekly data team meeting where we talk about the insight we did the week before, plan who's going to post their insight post when, to make sure that we don't have like them all clumping up on Monday or something. And it's become part of what we do as a team. And those of us, there are several of us who really try to pay attention to like, hey, if we're not doing as many this week, maybe people got busy, let's make sure that we pick that up next week. We have someone on the team who's really good at reminding us of that, Adam Stone. He's wonderful. We even have a Slack bot in our team channel that will ping on like Tuesdays to say, hey, how's everyone doing on their insights? Post in the thread here if you need any help with yours. So yeah, it's really become something that we've tried to weave through the whole fabric of the data team and our processes.
That's amazing.
One question, and this is really practical, but I think about this, the service organization, you mentioned that concept, and having a background in marketing, I know the pain of sort of, inadvertently becoming, a unit that just answers questions and like try to do that as quick as you can, and you're not actually pushing value back, which can be a tough place to be in. Mm-hmm. One thing I think when you start to push value back in to other parts of the organization, especially if you can build a repository, is that the number of questions that you get starts to decrease, because you can refer to this like thing where it's like, you know what, that's a great question. Like it was answered, go check this out or whatever. And, you kind of train people to like, maybe I should go search that repository before I ask the question or make a request or whatever. Is that dynamic happening inside of Netlify?
Yes, and it's so exciting. It's another piece that is so valuable about this. We make sure that it's part of the company onboarding, that people learn about it from their very first week. And it's been so exciting to see questions come up in our public team channel and have other people in the organization come in with the answer because of things that we've posted and published earlier. Yes. It's so exciting. It's like, yes, we're all in this together. This is something we all get to do. It's so fun.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about the hub and spoke model and the different roles that are on the data team. I think this is a really interesting subject, and I think our listeners would really appreciate just understanding some of the learnings that you have from the hub and spoke model. So can you just give us a quick breakdown of who's in the hub, and then who are the spokes, and how do those roles differ, especially on the spoke side of things?
Sure. Yes. Okay. We have in the hub, we've got our data engineer and an analytics engineer, me, a data analyst, and then our data evangelist.
Okay, we got to stop and define that role.
I know. I know. And it's another one that it's like, I'm not sure, but it's Lori Voss. He does a lot of speaking at conferences. He did the Jamstack survey and has been posting a lot about the results. So it's a fun role. So there's 4 of us in the hub. And then we've got 2 data analysts working on the product spoke. We've got an analytics engineer working on the growth spoke. And we've got another analytics engineer working on a finance spoke, and a data analyst working on finance. I think that's it. I have to count on my fingers to see if I got it all. And then what was the other part of your question?
Well, you answered it, actually. It was the roles and the spokes. And so one other question there, just because we're getting back to definition of terms here. We're coming full circle in the conversation. So it's interesting to me, and this may just be semantics and role names, but that you only mentioned one data engineer, which makes me interested in sort of the scope of skills and responsibility of an analytics engineer, working in a specific business function. Do they encompass like some data engineering, type tasks and some analytics tasks as well?
That's correct. That's exactly right. All of us on the team are able to do work across the board. We would probably need some of our data engineers' assistance with some of the data engineering pieces, but those of us who are analysts, but the analytics engineers can absolutely do really any part of that stack of work. So it works fine to have just one person in that role supporting a spoke, because they really can do like what is needed.
Very cool. Yeah. That is just as we've heard about different team structures and stuff, those people I would guess are extremely hard to find, right? Because, sort of those 2 skill sets, and someone who can really handle the technical side of it and the engineering side of it, and also the analytics side. But it makes total sense. Like that's such a high value role to be embedded in another team. And how do, I love that we're getting to like data team management stuff here. How do the embedded analytics engineers who's their boss, I guess I couldn't think of the right business buzzword.
No worries. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So before Emily left, she managed the entire data team. So she was the manager for everyone, hub and spoke. And the person, say, who is the analytics engineer on a spoke, would get their prioritization and their work tasks mainly from a specific stakeholder on their spoke team. Now we're actually like hiring for a director. So while we're in this position, we have folks who are on the spokes actually being managed as well as given prioritization tasks by the person that they work with on the spoke. And those of us in the hub have an interim manager. But the idea is that when we have a director of data again, they will again become the manager for the whole team.
This is great. So Paige, let's focus a little bit more like on the technology side of things, because I think we have covered, actually it was super interesting to have this conversation. We don't have like this kind of conversations too often. Like we focus more on the stacks and like the technologies that people use. So that was amazing. But you mentioned that you wrote your first ETL pipeline in Perl, right?
Yes.
Do you still do that? Do you still Perl?
I do not. That was, goodness, it was a while ago, maybe 2017. It was a little while ago.
Yeah.
So
what kind of tools you are using? You mentioned something like, you mentioned, for example, like DBT Explorer, which is like the metrics repository. What kind of tools you are using today?
Yeah, we use DBT. We use Transform as our metrics store. We use Snowflake as our data warehouse, Airflow. Trying to think what else. And then we also use Fivetran. We use Census for reverse ETL or operational analytics.
Yeah.
I think that's mainly it. And then in terms of just how we do our work, we use Git for GitHub for our code base and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Is that, are there any areas of technology that you're curious about that I haven't mentioned?
Well, I'd love to learn more about Explorer, because metrics repositories is something that we haven't touched that much. But before we get there, I'm wondering, you mentioned like Fivetran, for example, which is of course like helping you like with your pipelines. Do you also build your own pipelines, or you rely only on Fivetran to move the data around?
Our data engineer also builds pipelines.
Okay. Why?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to ask him. Yeah, I'm not sure. That was set up before I got here. Yeah.
Okay.
Why? I guess why are you asking? Why is that a surprise or?
No, it's actually something that is happening. Okay, first of all, like I have like a very long background in data pipeline, right?
Okay.
And like for the past like 7 years, together with Fivetran, like the whole industry is trying like to, let's say, abstract as much as possible like this EEL or whatever process that we are talking, and remove the need of like creating custom scripts, right? So you can use, let's say, the platform and have like this SaaS cloud experience, like in connecting your data source and move your data around. But it seems that still it's not enough. And I'm trying to understand why. And that's why I'm asking you. And I have asked like also other people, to be honest, because it's not that uncommon. Actually, it's pretty common to see that you might have multiple different vendors in the same company used, like stitch data together with like Fivetran, for example, or you can have one of these and at the same time have like a number of Python scripts that exist out there to do like some of the pipelines for different reasons, right? Like some people, they do it for performance, like because the specific pipeline that Fivetran has, it's slow, I don't know, or for cost reasons. But yeah, that's why I'm asking, because maybe you could add a little bit more color and your own like experience on why we still have to build our own pipelines.
I see. Got it. I see. Yeah, I'd have to think about that probably from our data engineer's perspective. And that would actually be something I'd really be interested in asking him about. So I think I will do that later today. Thank you for that prompt.
My
But
pleasure. Yeah.
it's very possible that that's still a holdover from what we had to do before, and
Mhm.
that when you've got that stuff figured out for your company, you've got all of the whatever logic you might need to get the data in the right shape. It could be that it's difficult to just move away from that, or maybe there just hasn't been enough of a reason yet. But I would really need to ask him to be
Okay.
sure. So it's a great question, and thank you.
Please let me know after you learn about it. Like I'm very curious. Yeah.
Well,
You didn't mention something as part of your like stack. You didn't mention anything about the visualization layer. And
I missed something.
yeah. So what do you use there?
Thank you. We use Mode for
Okay.
visualizations for kind of our insights and exploratory work, and then we use the visualization capabilities in Transform in our metric repository for stuff that is a little less exploratory, for stuff that's really more for stakeholders to be able to quickly get a number or do some kind of like higher level dimension slicing. So the two kind of work together, but we're also still always trying to communicate about like, this is when you would use Mode and this is when you would use Transform.
Can you help me understand, like, when I should be, let's say I work for Netlify, right?
Right.
When should I use one and when I should use like the other?
Right. So Transform is great for metrics that we've already kind of figured out as a company, already have definitions for, and that that you're interested in looking at or learning more about, that we already have available, the dimensions you'd like to slice by. Mode is going to be better if you're kind of starting from more raw data. We don't have the metric really defined yet. You're kind of trying to explore how different models maybe interact with each other. That's kind of where we start for, like, say, building the definition for a metric.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like I'm wondering, like, how the process look like when, like, you start like from the exploration part, right? Like using Mode, until you reach the point where you have a metric that you can well define it and put it into Explorer. Like, what happens in between? How does this work?
Yeah,
I'm very, very curious to hear about that. It's
right. Yeah, I'm thinking about work that a couple of my teammates did to define something called activation, where they had a list of, it was several people working on it. We had, I think two of our analytics engineers were working on it from the data team side. And they had a list of things you're going to look at, like different metrics, different things teams might do, and at different like time sections, I guess, from after sign up and when they might do them. And so they did a bunch of work in this GitHub issue and used Mode to do different visualizations and different cuts of the data to start to really understand how we can actually define like activation for a team. And they were able to kind of narrow down the funnel of options until they came up with, activation is this. And when a team has done this, that's considered activated. And now we have that. So that metric goes into Transform, where somebody can run a chart to say what's the number of activated teams weekly since the beginning of the year. And you can see, where that number is going, or what's the percentage of activated teams that have done X or Y, and you can look at that and Transform. But that's because we have that metric that we figured out by doing all this exploration in Mode with all this raw data.
Can you use Explorer together with BI tool like Mode, or like completely like disconnected?
When you talk about Explorer, is that Transform, the product?
Yeah, sorry.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah. Yes. So Transform did develop recently a mode connector. And so we have been using that. We set that up a couple of weeks ago, I think, a few weeks ago, and have been doing visualizations in mode with metrics that are defined in Transform, which is really handy because we do have people kind of doing work in different areas. So for instance, if I know I want to do an exploration that has to do with revenue, I don't have to necessarily go like talk to the analytics engineer working on finance and say, hey, what's the newest definition of revenue to make sure I'm getting it right. We have that definition in Transform. So I could either look at the SQL and Transform, or now I can actually just pull in that metric into mode, use it in my visualization, and I know that it is the correct definition of revenue. And so I'm getting the right numbers.
Okay. And I mean, if I understood correctly, like you define the metric in Transform with SQL?
Yes, it's a combination of SQL and YAML files.
Oh, okay. I have to check Transform. Like I'm very interested in this. I was also, because I saw that you have like on your background like Coalition, like the conference that happened like last weekend, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think there was a lot of discussions there about like the metric layer and like this new thing that it's called like the headless BI, whatever that means. Is this like a rebranding of BI in your opinion, or is it just like, let's say, not a rebranding, but a iteration on the BI because the needs today are different than they were like 10 years ago when Looker started, for example? Because Looker, if you think about it, like with these two layers that he had, like the visualization part and the LookML part, I mean, with LookML, you were pretty much defining also, let's say, metrics, right? Okay, it wasn't called like that back then, but I'm just wondering about that. Like I really tried to position, let's say, the product category of like the headless BI and the metric layers, and what's the differentiation at the end and why it has to be created compared to BI tools. So you have been working on that for quite a while. So how do you feel about that?
Trying to think, do I feel like the talk of the metrics layer as like a rebranding of BI, or just an extension of like where it needs to go next, kind of? I will have to think about that. I really will, because I mean, I think so much of what I feel like we're all trying to figure out is, how do we make working with data something that is easier for our stakeholders and end users, and also easier for data analysts? And so trying to find solutions that sort of make life better for both groups is, I think, what we're working on, you know. And so that continues to be, because like if you go too far down one road, you know, yeah, it may be easier for analysts, but it isn't great for stakeholders. You go too far down this other road, yes, it's much easier for people to, you know, do a little more self-serve stuff, but it can be really, really hard to get there in a sustained way. So I guess this is maybe a different way of trying to solve that problem, of maybe kind of isolating a certain set of like difficulties and saying, okay, we're going to address fixing this set of difficulties with this new like bunch of tools or areas of creating tooling in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps. I really am thinking about this as I talk, so I may have like more to say later.
No. I think I don't think that it's easy to answer anyway. Like, and the reason that I asked you was more like to have this kind of discussion, not like get an answer, because and I couldn't stop thinking while you were talking about that. 10 years ago, when we were talking about BI, it was all about visual interactions, no code, no SQL, like everything should be like self-serve without any technical knowledge. And when I asked you about transform, you told me, oh, it's SQL and a bunch of YAML files, right? Which is not exactly what, let's say, a CFO would ever use, right? So I see like this back and forth between being, let's say, completely non-technical to getting to a very technical. And I think at the end, like the solution is probably somewhere in between. Probably we need both, right? And we need to find like, let's say, the right balance there. So there is a reason that all that stuff exists, but yeah, it's not answered yet. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think that's still in the process to figure it out, and all these tools are just like attempts, like to try and figure it out. So yeah, that's great.
I just wanted to say, I mean, I think part of it is that stakeholders are and end users are not a monolith, and so there are different like layers of ways that they can use data. And so so we're just still continuing to try to figure out there aren't necessarily solutions that's going to work for absolutely everyone, but maybe we can get like areas or groups. Okay, this is a good solution to help like this type of end user. This is a good solution to help this group of stakeholders.
100%. Eric, you have the microphone.
I think we're at time. I think we're close to time here. I just need to say though, I really appreciate you distilling sort of all of the complexities of these challenges into saying, we're all trying to figure out how to make, working with data easier, both for ourselves and for the stakeholders that, that we serve. And really, when you distill down all the tooling, all the team structure, all that sort of stuff, I mean, that really is the goal. So I appreciate that. I think that's like one of the best concise, sort of explanations of, what we're all trying to do. One last question for you, since we're at time here. So you have such a wide skill set. You can do data engineering. You work day to day as an analyst, and many other things. What advice do you have for our audience? If they say, okay, I'm listening to Paige and I would love to work on a team like that, in a role like that, but I'm maybe early in my career, or I'm maybe working at a company that sort of maybe doesn't value data or the data team in the same way that, it's very clear that Netlify does. Like, what advice do you have for them to sort of take some next steps?
Oh, that is really cool. One of the things that I realized that has helped me get to where I've been able to and get the experiences that I've had is I've managed to keep my excitement about working with data regardless of what else is going on. It's like there's this fundamental love of what working with data is and what it can do, and that no matter what else is going on, I get to get into a database and look at data and figure stuff out, and that is always so much fun. It's like just enjoying the process of discovery the data has, and keeping that passion and love is something that has really helped me no matter what situation I've been in, because it's motivating. It's always been motivating me to find that joy even when stuff around is difficult. And I think another aspect of that is always being curious about what new stuff is going on in the industry. That curiosity and willingness to learn and be interested can open a lot of doors. It really can. There's a pretty awesome data community, especially around like the Coalesce Data Conference I was at. There are people who love sharing we love sharing our love of data and working with data, especially with people who are earlier in their career. And so getting connected to a community of people who have this passion, who are continuing to try to make the industry like better for all of us, is really powerful, especially early in your career.
That is so helpful. And I think two things here. One, it's very clear that you've maintained that sense of curiosity and love of exploration, which I think is great. And just from my own experience, I know that maintaining that, if you've gone through the process of sort of building teams and, you know, a company tripling in size, like it's hard, you know, just the physical pressure of a system that's expanding that quickly, you know, can kind of snuff that, you know, the flame of curiosity out. So I think that is wonderful advice. Well, unfortunately, we are at time, but this has been such a good conversation. I learned so much, and it's just been really fun to hear about sort of different sides of data that we don't normally get to hear about on the show. So thank you.
Yay, it has been an absolute blast for me too. I've loved every minute of it. Thank you both so much.
Okay, Kostas, my takeaway is, and I kept thinking this throughout the conversation, I'm just sort of blown away by how many different things it seems like the Netlify data team is doing that you sort of imagine as the best way to do something, you know, sort of actually having a team structure where you have embedded analytics engineers that have, you know, sort of broad and deep skill sets, having a knowledge repository, you know, each analyst on the data team delivering insights on a weekly basis to the team, managing that with version control in GitHub, you know, the exploration process. Like, there were just so many things that I was like, wow, they are super high functioning, it sounds like. And it was extremely impressive.
Yeah. 100%. I think it was, probably one of the most interesting conversations that we had so far when it comes to the organizational side of like data. And like when you listen to Paige, like you almost want to be part of this team, you know, like you feel like something great is happening there, and at the same time they're also having fun, you know, which is amazing. I mean, that's the holy grail of like work environment. So, and what I would like to add to what you said, which is something like I 100% agree with you, is that yeah, it is like a matter of the organization, but it also like heavily starts and it's like related with also what the individual does. Like if you remember when like we asked her about, okay, how did you convince your people there to start like writing all this content as part of like the everyday job? Like it was amazing to hear from her like how determined the people were to do that, because it wasn't a part of the job description anyway, right? Now it might become at the end because they saw the value of this. But it's amazing, like when you get people who love what they're doing, what can come out of this.
It's like it wasn't like a result of like reacting to some sort of pain, and so we're gonna like deliver this, right?
Oh yeah, or it wasn't like we brought, you know, like a consultant from the Big Four or whatever, and like they told us you have to do that if you want to IPO. Like,
yeah, if that came out of the Big Four, I think we'd have to have that person on the show.
Yeah. Anyway, it was amazing. Like I really enjoyed the conversation with her, and I don't know, maybe we should have an episode where we have the whole team from Netlify on the episodes, and
that'd be awesome. Let's do that.
Yeah, they all interact together. I think it's going to be fun and very interesting.
Be great. All right. Well, we're at time here. Thanks for joining the DataStack show, and we'll catch you on the next episode.